Hey, what's going on? I'm going to be doing another install video for you. This time I'm going to be putting in a Boss 302 manifold into my 2015 Pro Charge Mustang. Didn't really see a lot of anything from an installation perspective on the web or any of the forums. To be honest, I haven't done this before. I installed my own Pro Charger and things like that, but I haven't done any swaps on the intake. So I don't really have a tool list. I'll put together what I think it's going to take. And I'll make updates as I go throughout the video, but this isn't like a shop video where I'm going to tell you up front what you need to get. So you have to watch the video in order to get out some tricks and tips. Anyway, this is what I will be putting it into. So that's currently how my setup looks. D1SC, Pro Charged, and wastegated using a tile wastegate, and then this guy right here is going to be taking the place of the stock intake manifold. I have a problem with a little bit of surging that's caused what I think by the IMRCs, so I'm trying to get rid of that, and then I also want to make sure that I'm taking advantage of the 7700 red line that Lund has tuned for me. Alright, so bear with me. I'll try to make this as quick as I can and get to the points that I find are challenging or helpful as I'm putting it in. So thanks for watching. So here are the tools that I have so far. I think this should be just about everything. Drill, some snips, 3/8 ratchet, 10mm deep, two smaller extensions just in case, a longer extension because I'm going to need that to get down to the lower bolts, an 8mm socket, torque wrench, Dremel because I might have to cut the hood up, and then obviously the shop vac. And I've seen a lot of pictures and the hood is going to get cut right about, right about here. There'll be a square where it'll hit, and I'll cut that section out. First thing I'm going to go through, just so you know, because I'm not going to film this part, removing the intake manifold. The 4 long, I'll disconnect all the hosing and the intake right here. Remove the vacuum block out of the way. The evap part will come off as well. That's going to go underneath the intake. And then to remove the intake, you're going to have to, or the intake manifold, you're going to have to depressurize the fuel rail here. I'll tell you the fuse and everything here in just a second to pull it. And then unclip each of the injectors down over here. So there's 8 of them obviously. And I think that's what's really going to have to go into this. If I get stuck along the way, then I'll let you know. Okay, so I've got the injectors disconnected, as you can see down there. Pop the fuel line. I didn't depressurize the system, but I did put on glasses. Careful, it will spit if you try to do that. There is a ton of fuel in the lines. For anybody that's swapped injectors, you know that. So you'll have to deal with that when you go to take the fuel injectors out of the manifold or put it back in. I am going to end up pulling the injector rails, or the fuel rails, I'm sorry, off, as well as the injectors. It's just, I think, going to be easier to get to the bolts down there. I don't know that I'm going to take the whole manifold off as one piece. Maybe I can. I'll see if I can. I'll let you know one way or the other if I pull it off like the entire thing all at once, or if I'm going to take the rails off. But I'll make that decision here in a minute. All right, so here's where I'm at. Little bit of a mess. As soon as I loosened up the fuel rail bolts for the injectors, I immediately spilled fuel everywhere, so that's nice, something to deal with. But you do have to remove your fuel rail bolts as well as the 3 on the side in order to loosen the manifold for it to come out. But like I said, I got a little bit of a mess on my hands because as soon as I cracked those bolts loose, had a little bit of fuel leak out, and then it was just all downhill from there. So I got a little bit of gasoline to clean up. There are odds and ends that you'll need to disconnect. I disconnected my throttle body, pull it to the side. I'll pull that off here in just a second. And then a couple of little hoses and things like that. As far as tools go, you need 8mm, 10mm. I did have some extra hose because I've heard I need that, and then you'll need some wire clamps. Other than that, everything's been pretty easy so far, but you do have to remove the 4 bolts for your fuel rail to loosen up the manifold, and then the 3 on either side. All right, it's out. Not as dirty as I thought it was going to be. I'll wipe these down and get it all ready. There's some gas in the intake valves, so that should evaporate here pretty quickly, hopefully. Other than that, fairly straightforward. Back here is a nightmare, so getting the IMRC valves all disconnected. There's a whole bunch of stuff on the back, so after you get everything all disconnected, you got to deal with a bunch of plugs in the back. I think there's 4 plugs and then some other things that are bolted to the back of the, or I guess taped to the back of the IMRC valve. So kind of a pain in the butt to get back there. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy, not too bad. I'll update you here in a second. Really quickly, there are a lot of plugs and everything that are back here, so I ended up just zip tying up to the back rail back here. There'll be plenty of space underneath the intake manifold for other things, but I just didn't want that rattling around, so I zip tied all of that back up there. This thing sits up tall. Now I know why you got to notch it in the back. Way taller than the stock one. So much more space underneath it. Interesting, I could rerun some of my vacuum lines that I haven't been happy with, so I'm kind of pumped about that. Overall, so far so good. Pretty easy install. If I wasn't stopping and filming and I knew what tools, I could knock this thing out probably in 30 minutes. This is it really is a cake install. Not difficult really at all once you know where everything's at. So almost done. I'm going to button everything back up and start running the lines. Okay, so the manifold is in. Everything's all buttoned up except for the throttle body and the evap. One of the things I've noticed is that there's a hole on the back of your throttle body right here that's supposed to align to this grommet or this dowel right here. It doesn't, so I'm gonna have to trim this off in order to get that to fit. Something I didn't expect, but not a big deal. Alright, so a quick update on where we are at. I got the manifold installed. Let me show you what's going on and some of the things that you're going to need. Like I said, I didn't know all the parts up front that I was going to get, so I'm getting ready to run to the store to go pick up a few things. So here's what we got going on. Pro charger is installed, the piping, so I had to take this off and that off and twist it, kind of make an adjustment. It's not fitting perfectly, so I'm probably going to end up ordering a new pipe and maybe working with somebody to try and get a hard pipe kit done. But otherwise, just a little bit of twisting on the pipe to get that, or the tube to get it to fit. Everything else all bolts back up. You do need to have your fuel rail on the manifold prior to putting the manifold back into the car. I thought I could get the manifold in and put the fuel rail on. It doesn't work that way. So get the manifold on, put your fuel rail on, put the fuel rail on, then put the manifold on, then everything else bolts up. This little guy right here is a little bit of a pain in the butt to get on. You got to do a little bending, but it does go on. Here's the cut. It's ugly right now. I use a Dremel to get it cut out, but I'm going to go get some pinch molding to clean that up a bit before I put the hood liner back on it again. Manifold is pretty easy to put on. You can see there's a lot of space in there that you didn't necessarily have before. The only thing I don't have hooked up yet is the evap that's sitting right here. So that'll run here. Now let me tell you about the hosing, because that's the part that's most confusing for people, and I'll do another quick blip on that once I get it all installed. So the evap line is actually going to come from here, and it's going to run down under here to the evap port on the top of this. So evap is this side of the intake manifold. On the other side, you're going to have this, which is going to run to your brake booster. This does fit back into here, so I'm just going to tighten that back up. I got a little worm clamp that I'm going to put on there. And then here for this port, I'm going to end up using this for my vacuum block for the Pro Charger. And that's really about it as far as running the lines go. The install overall is pretty cake. Like I said, not too challenging, not too difficult. On these bolts down here, when you're actually bolting the manifold on, there's 3 of them. Remember, 2 tights broke, so don't go too crazy on the torque on those. And like I said, the the injector manifold bolts hold down the intake as well, so nothing too crazy there. I did clean up a bit in the back, try and get that. All right, so we're all done. So let me do a quick recap on everything you have to do to get this thing in and out. There will be 3 bolts. It'll be 8 millimeters on either side that connect the intake manifold to the heads themselves. There'll be 2 bolts that connect the intake manifold as well that hold down your fuel rails. Those are 10 millimeter. You have a 10 millimeter that you'll need to disconnect up here, a nut for your heater hose supports. So an 8 and a 10 millimeter to get those out. You'll need various clamps in order to pull off your hoses, your stock hoses. I needed an 11 millimeter to get my T-clamp removed. And then there's about 4 plugs on the back for your IMRC, if I remember correctly, that you'll have to disconnect. Your evap will be attached. You'll have to disconnect that, as well as take it off the intake. Throttle body, you'll need an 8 millimeter in order to get your throttle body off. And then as far as additional things that you're going to need, you'll need a little bit of hosing. So this is I went to the store to grab this hose. It's slightly bigger than fuel line for the evap. And then I reused the stock hose on this one to connect my vacuum block because it already had the bend in it. And then the stock line, I reused that one for your brake booster vacuum line as well, so you could reuse that. So really the only thing I had to buy was this line. For those that are Pro Charged and you had your IMRCs connected, you'll need to recap this. So I bought a little bit of a plug cap for that one to cap that line off so that it's solid, since there's no more line going to the IMRC. Intake manifold comes out, like I said, there's a little bit of a mess for me when I unbolted unbolted the fuel rails. The fuel decided to leak out. The injectors came out, or stayed inside of the intake manifold versus coming out, so there's a little bit of a mess to clean up there, but nothing too significant. I didn't depressurize the system, I just popped it. Make sure you're wearing glasses if you do that, and surround the whole thing, because it does spray a little bit of gas if you decide to do that without depressurizing the system. The evap and everything, so let me walk through the lines really quick. Your evap is going to go here, this line runs there, and then down here you can see the evap. The stock line, which is this one right here that has a green plug on it, will connect back into the evap, and then it just kind of sits there. I ended up zip tying my vacuum block and then this line up as well, so that way it stayed and it didn't rattle and give me any false knock by bouncing around down there. So your evap runs here to the blue. There'll be a blue grommet on that one. And then this is the stock evap line. That will run in, they just plug it in over there. Vacuum block goes here, and then brake booster line goes there. Other than that, that is about it. A little bit of movement on this to get it to fit right. Had to remove my reservoir to get that to fit right. With intake bend, I'm still not happy with this, but eventually I'll get that replaced. Otherwise, I guess the most important part, this thing does not fit under the stock hood, so you have to make a cut. That's my temporary solution right now. I just got some pinch molding, cut the opening out, pinch molded this up, and now it fits perfectly fine. I'm sure there's maybe a cleaner way to do it, but I just use my Dremel to cut that out. And I'll probably custom fit or get some custom pinch molding made that looks a little bit better than that. But it's a temporary fit right now, so it doesn't rub anything on the intake manifold. Other than that, super quick. If you were to bring it over to my house, I could probably knock you out in about an hour, if that. So that's with a beer or two. Easy install, looks clean. Super excited to see how it runs, get my tune loaded up, get it on the street, and get some logs back to Lund. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps.